All right, everybody, it's Tuesday afternoon. Welcome to the show. This is the Horn Takes podcast, your very rough around the edges Texas sports talk destination. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. Today's the after action review. We had a lot of technical difficulties yesterday. We weren't able to get in Exaggeration Monday, but we're going to get this after action review. We're going to wrap up Kansas State. We're going to look ahead to TCU. I'm super excited. I got a very special guest today. We got Mike Hardge from Texas Sports Unfiltered. You can find Mike at Texas Sports Unfiltered on YouTube, also at TS Unfiltered on Twitter, and then obviously Mike's personal at Hardball Hardge on Twitter. Mike, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. How you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm glad to be a part of this. I'm excited to be a part of trying to figure out the madness, which is the Texas Longhorn football team.
Man.
A good football team, 8-1.
Yeah.
But a lot of questions still need to be answered.
Absolutely. Mike, you spent 4 years on 1300 AM The Zone. Then you did about the last year on the Horn there in Austin. Now you're headed back to 13 AM The Zone on November 13th, right?
Yep, starting Monday. I'm actually in the studios right now at the iHeart Studios. I had a great time with the folks over at Texas Sports Unfiltered. As you said, I was with The Zone in the very beginning when I started my career, and now I'm back at home where it all started.
Man, that is awesome. Well, thanks for spending a few minutes with us today. We will jump right into it. Texas holds on late to beat Kansas State 33-30. It was another one of those Jekyll and Hyde type games for the Texas Longhorns. We've seen a couple of those over the last few weeks. What surprised you the most about this one?
Well, it was just the fight, the inconsistency on the offensive side of the ball. One of the things that we've always kind of expected from the Texas football team is to be a good offensive team. Now, there was a lot of injuries that have been playing a part of what's been going on. You look at what Malik Murphy started off great, was on fire. People were trying to figure out, oh, man, we're about to have ourselves a quarterback controversy. Then all of a sudden in the second half, everybody's like, when is Quinn coming back? But that's the life of a Texas football fan. You're so happy when things are going well, and then you get frustrated when things aren't going as well. But you also got to look at this, and this is one of the things that I always continue to talk about. They've been playing with a backup quarterback, backup left tackle, backup safeties, backup corners, and they are still in a position to play for a Big 12 championship. It's a lot of work during the season to be healthy the entire time. Coach Sark said yesterday during his weekly presser that this is the first time that everybody in the 2 deep got a chance to practice together again. So that's the impressive part. But going back to the game on Saturday, you sit there and you look and you say, why did we stop running the football? What ended up happening? Even when Malik was having the problems that he was, you still had those two monsters in the backfield that we could have continued to give the ball to. And when you're turning the ball over, which Malik did that a couple times, it puts your defense, which have been playing great. The number one rushing offense in America was the K-State offense, and they only ran for 33 yards as total. So those were the things that kind of frustrated me when you looked at what happened this past Saturday.
Absolutely. Texas obviously limped into this game. Texas has been limping really since the OU Texas game, to be perfectly honest. One of our four big questions last Thursday on the show going into this game was, can the Texas offensive line sort of step up and answer the bell against a really good K-State defensive front? I think the offensive line turned in probably their best performance of the season up to this point against a quality opponent. 0 sacks, only 3 tackles for loss. Talk about the job that Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian have done getting these guys into the program and then developing this offensive line.
That is something that Sark has talked about since the spring when he was talking about the depth that this team has now provided themselves. He always talk about big humans. Well, you can go and get big humans, but if they're not athletic enough to play on that line and go up against some of the best defensive lines in the conference, it makes it a little bit difficult for you. But the development of Kyle Flood, the work that they've put in to get to this level has been nothing short of amazing, because one of the biggest questions that we've had for quite some time was the offensive line at the University of Texas. You remember those seasons where you're like, do we have anybody that can block?
Yeah.
And now you're being able to develop those players. You got a DJ Williams that was able to fill in. You still have Kelvin Banks. So there has been a lot that you desire on that offensive line, but there's nothing that hasn't been addressed when you start looking at what Texas can be moving forward. I think they've done an amazing job. And you're right. They ran for 230 yards in that game. As I said, K-State was the number one rushing offense in the country, number one. They ran for 226 on the regular, and Texas almost got to that themselves. So you got to give a lot of props to what you saw on that offensive line. I know a lot of people get frustrated. You brought it up. No sacks. That's important. That's huge.
Huge.
You keep your quarterback clean, and then you open those holes for a Jonathan Brooks, who finally got back over the 100-yard mark. And then C.J. Baxter with that big run that he had. We needed it late, though. We needed it late.
Yep.
We needed it to make sure we could get some of those runs late.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm an old ex-offensive lineman, so I love the big guys, right? And one of the most interesting stories, you look at this group of offensive linemen, and there's a lot of young talent and a lot of really, really good young talent. But I think one of the most interesting stories is old Christian Jones. Had a rough couple years at the University of Texas, starting out. Kyle Flood comes in. All of a sudden, Christian Jones, I think Christian Jones might be a guy that'll play in the NFL one day. And what's crazy is he missed the game on Saturday. Cam Williams comes right in, and besides a couple of false start penalties that kind of set Texas back, really didn't see a big drop-off with Cam Williams, who's a guy that hasn't played a whole lot. So the development there been astounding, and I really do love the Christian Jones story. Happy as I could be to see that guy really be successful. You mentioned Malik Murphy's great start. Man, he did start off great. 7 of 11 with a touchdown in the first quarter. And then all of a sudden the wheels kind of come off, man. Rough second, rough third quarter. And then I thought, like, in the fourth quarter, after Kansas State tied him, he had a pretty decent drive to get Texas back down the field, kick a field goal. He went 4 for 8. Probably could have got a pass interference on Worthy in the end zone there. Should have. But I thought the one throw in that whole series that was just phenomenal to me was that fourth down throw to J.T. Sanders. That took a lot of guts. And I talked on the show yesterday, which didn't air because I had technical difficulties, about how Malik Murphy just has some balls on him, man. That guy is not afraid to get the ball down the field. He's not afraid to throw it into tight windows. He ends up finishing this game 19 of 37, 248 yards, 1 touchdown. He did have the 2 INTs. How would you rate Malik's performance in his second start as a collegiate athlete?
I would rank it more towards a C. And the reason why I say it's more towards a C, because it was an average performance when you start looking at it. Yes, you start off phenomenal. You got great numbers. Your energy level is through the roof. You're walking around with that swag. But I'm always trying to figure out how you're going to react after something bad happens. And for me, he's still in that learning process. And this was something that Coach Sark also touched on. The learning process of understanding when to take a sack, when to throw a ball away, and not trying to force a ball in a space that you shouldn't be doing that, because you still have it. Now, I will give him a little bit of grace because that ball, the second interception that he threw kind of deep, Jonte Cook fell down on the cross because he was coming across. But you go back and watch it, there were going to be 3 guys there in that area. So you're like, I know you're trying to get your guy to go make a play for you, but sometimes it is one of those plays where you just kind of have to you chalk it up to him falling down, but you also got to make sure that you evaluate the field a little bit more. But you're right. That throw that he made on a fourth down play, that was a crucial part of the game. That was probably going to be a turning point moment if he didn't get that first down. For him to still have that confidence, to believe in his arm, even after some of those tough plays, those are some of the things that a quarterback has to be able to push out there. You talked about it. You're an offensive lineman. You go in there and you're thinking, all right, man, just go make a play for us. We got you. We're going to give you enough time. But if you're playing in the secondary, the mentality of a defensive back is, I can't worry about the play that happened before this. I got to get back in. That's the same thing as the quarterback, too. You got to be able to go out there and say, I don't care what happened prior to this. I'm about to make this big time throw in a big moment. And that's exactly what he did. And the confidence of Coach Sark to have him be able to make that play was huge too.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really cool how Sark hasn't really skipped a beat in the way he's called games since Malik's been in there. I think that shows a lot of confidence, not only just in Malik himself, but the whole rest of the team. He knows the defense can pick him up. He knows that the other guys out there can pick it up. The running backs, you mentioned that, the rushing offense. Man, they absolutely pounded the rock on a really good K-State team. The only criticism I would have is kind of what you alluded to early. Why didn't we just do that a little bit more, especially there in the third quarter? Ended up with 230 yards, 6.2 yards per carry, a couple scores. Brooks goes over 100. Baxter with a massive 54-yarder on a 4th and short play. A lot of fans from Texas are worried about the running game headed into this season with Bijan and Roschon leaving for the NFL. What do you think has made this running game so successful through 9 games so far this season?
Well, it goes back to your first question about the Kyle Flood offensive line. Kyle Flood's offensive line did Bijan and Roschon, they were elite anyway. But those offensive linemen, everybody kept talking about how they weren't that great. Well, you're getting a chance to see it because nobody expected this to happen from the Texas football team. You just talked about the running game and how it was being replaced because of those special players. Well, Jonathan Brooks was a guy that was a big-time recruit as well. I'll throw in even Jaden Blue, who was one of the better recruits in the state of Texas. And then you go get a guy like C.J. Baxter. I expected the running game to be good. I have been on record. I was a huge Jonathan Brooks fan from the very beginning. When he came to the University of Texas, I thought he was going to be one of those guys that might have flown under the radar because of those other 2 guys that we had, but that are now playing in the NFL. But as I looked at him and the way he had wiggle, and if you go back and you look at every year that he's played, he had a big run in every single game that he got a chance to play in. So I expected him to have some of those moments. C.J. Baxter, as I said, one of the top recruits in the nation. I figured he was going to be a tough running back. And let's not forget, Jonathan Brooks at the beginning of the year, he wasn't even the starter.
I know, that's so crazy to me.
And he's over 1,000 yards. And they always say, Sark always tells you, he's always had 1,000-yard back. Well, he just added another one.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable, just the wealth of talent that Steve Sarkisian has had while he's been at Texas, across the board, but especially in that running back room. I had guys, I've been a big proponent of Jonathan Brooks as well, and I've had people on TikTok and other platforms, who's Jonathan Brooks? He's hadn't done. I'm like, man, the kid scored 63 touchdowns his senior year in high school. Like, and I had to go look that. When I looked that up, I was like, there's no freaking way he did 63 touchdowns in high school his senior year. So yeah, man, he's a big game breaker waiting to happen. I really like Jaden Blue. I'm glad you mentioned him. I know you can't, it's hard to spread the carries across 3 or 4 different guys, but man, I think Jaden Blue, if he's a guy that stays patient, I think he's going to be a guy that could break out here at the University of Texas. Physically, to me, not a better guy on the roster at the running back position. Just like measurable speed, right. Sort of his elusiveness laterally, all that. Great looking athlete. Really excited to see what this running game can continue to do this season, and really as we press on into the SEC next season, I think it's just going to get better. The talent's there, and that offensive line has had some time to gel. Get in the system for another year. It's going to be really exciting. Let's talk about these wide receivers for a minute. Adonai Mitchell with just another monster game, 8 for 149 and a touchdown. How much do you think adding Adonai Mitchell has added to this Texas offense? I mean, we know the stats, but do we feel like there's another guy on the roster that maybe could have plugged in and done something similar to that, or is Adonai Mitchell just an elite level wide receiver?
Well, I think it's a combination of a bunch of things, but to answer your question, yeah, I think bringing him in, that was kind of one of those silent move in the dark kind of moves that Sark did, because when you heard that he was coming to the University of Texas, and then you go back and watch where he was at Georgia. He didn't get a lot of targets, but all he did was catch touchdowns.
Right.
The targets that he did get, he caught touchdowns, and he had to step into a big time role when one of their wide receivers ended up getting hurt in the national championship. He had to go out there and play. So that was one of those moves that you're like, okay, let's see what can happen. We already was trying to figure out. I thought Isaiah Nayor was going to be that guy. He hadn't sniffed it. And I don't know if it's the injury still. I don't know if it's the work ethic. I don't know. Because he went from being a star to thinking, oh, man, this is a great pickup, to getting hurt. And now he's not even in a rotation. I can't even tell you how many times he's actually played in a game.
Yeah, it hasn't been many.
There's more. Yeah, I don't know if there's more to the story. But another guy that I still believe should have been getting more targets this year is Jordan Whittington. You talked about what you saw from Jonathan Brooks in his high school career. Well, Jordan Whittington was just as good, and he was playing multiple positions.
Yep.
And every time he's on the field, something good would happen. But the problem for him was he wasn't healthy enough. He kept getting hurt. Last year, he played a full season, was healthy. This year, he's been a whole season healthy. I just don't think he gets enough targets. And Coach Sark talked about it. When you look at all the weapons that they have, how can I get guys the ball? Well, to me, you're the offensive mastermind. You're the guy that knows how to design plays and scheme it up perfectly. Find a way to get that guy involved in the game, because you're a lineman. You understand this. He blocks his tail off every single week to no rewards. And I'm a firm believer in, if you're a wide receiver, because if you go back and look at some of the other wide receivers on this team, they don't block very well.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Don't block very well, but he does. And I think he deserves a little bit more kudos for what he's given this football team.
Yeah, I heading into the OU game this year, I just had a feeling. I thought it'd be a Jay Witt type of game. And he had a really big game. It would have been a much bigger game if Quinn would have seen him on one of those third down plays early in the game. He was wide open coming across the deep middle of the field. Yeah, I really do like Jay Witt. I love his work ethic. I love the way he blocks, man. He makes so many plays happen on the outside. People always ask, how come we can't break any long runs? You can't break long runs if your wide receivers aren't blocking downfield. And, man, this group does a pretty good job of it. And Jay Witt is definitely the cream of the crop when it comes to that. Let's switch over and talk about defense for a minute. You mentioned it earlier on in the show. K-State comes in rushing the ball 226 yards per game. I think Texas net held them to 20 yards in this game. And that's just insane to me. I remember in 2021, teams just running the ball smooth down Texas's throat.
Yeah.
Same coaching staff, a lot of the same players. Talk about the development of this run defense under Coach Kwiatkowski and Bo Davis.
Well, I think the biggest part is believing in the experience that you have up front, the experience with a T'Vondre Sweat, the experience with a Byron Murphy. Barron Sorrell is starting to play a lot better on the front. You're still waiting for those big play moments from an Alfred Collins, but you also got Vernon Broughton, who's been able to play well up front. And then look at the emergence of an Ethan Burke. Somebody that's been in the system, a former lacrosse player that now knows how to use his body and the leverage to get into certain positions. I'm excited about this defensive team. And Byron Murphy said it in the postgame. We told everybody, I don't care who you are, you're not running the football on us. And for them to hold that team, that is a smash mouth football team with K-State that loves to run the football, and for Texas to keep them to those numbers, that is an amazing, amazing feat. And not only is it an amazing feat for what they did in that game, look at what they've done all year.
Oh yeah, they've been phenomenal.
Very consistent, man. They've been phenomenal. And T'Vondre Sweat, somebody who I was a big, big fan of when he first got to the University of Texas. Obviously, you got to develop. You got to go through the tough love type of thing from Bo Davis. And what Bo has been able to get out of that front four has been nothing short of impressive.
Yeah, man, I don't think I've seen – I said it the other day. I don't think there's a tandem of defensive tackles in this country that are as active and just physically disruptive as those two guys in the middle, Byron Murphy, T'Vondre Sweat. It's just bodies flying everywhere. It's like dust and bodies and running backs going down. It's crazy. Yeah. Really outstanding group. And I think a lot of that is obviously those kids buying in, but also Coach Bo Davis finally got enough time with these guys and has got them on the right track. Their technique is amazing. They do everything right, and they do it so consistently. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like it. We talked about this defense starting out really fast, man, and they did absolutely start out fast in this game, kind of like the offense, and they did get put in some bad positions by the offense in the second half, but kind of like the offense, they started to wear down a little bit, it seemed like. Gave up 21 points in about 6 minutes of football play, which is unbelievable. If you went to go get a sandwich and came and sat back down, you'd go, what the hell just happened? But then they get to the end of the game. K-State's got 4 plays from inside the 10 and really starting out at the 6, I believe.
Yep.
What are you thinking as you're watching that game and K-State's got 1st and goal at the 6-yard line after we'd seen what we'd seen so far in the second half?
I'm like, how did we mess up the church's money? That's exactly what was going on through my head. I'm like, my goodness, how did you go from being in this position to pretty much running away to the game until we're going to come down with a big play by this defense? It was frustrating, but it also goes back to they had blocked everything out. They went back to it. And again, I had this conversation with some other people the other day. This Texas team this year, if it would have been last year or the year before, they would have lost that game.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt in my mind that this team has learned to fight, scratch, and claw for everything that they've gotten. And from what we saw on that moment, where they had that, and the guys that you were talking about earlier and I brought up just a minute ago, they were the ones that set the tone for that last 4 plays and said, no, bro, we're not about to lose this game, and I'm going to disrupt every single play. And that's what Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, Barron Sewell, Ethan Burke in that defense, even Jalen Ford coming up there and making some plays. Ryan Watts holding his water on the crossing route right there, where normally he would have got sucked in, and then they would have had somebody in the flat. Them buying into what is being taught to them and knowing what those critical moments, and pretty much the Big 12 championship flashed before their very eyes, and they just went and took it back. That was huge, huge statement by that defense.
Absolutely, and you mentioned Barron Sorrell. All those guys had amazing plays down the stretch. There was one play on K-State's drive where they missed the field goal, where they got the ball out in the flat, and it was 3rd down, and I thought Barron Sorrell made it was like a quiet play. I don't think a lot of people noticed it during the game. He brought him down short on 3rd down, but that could have easily been a touchdown. At the very least, it was a 1st down. And play calling on 1st and 10 versus 3rd and 1, it was 2nd down. They got to 3rd and 1. Play calling changes. They decide to do one of those QB runs. They get drilled in the backfield again. Huge play. That's the kind of effort you were just talking about that we see so often by this Texas defensive line, linebacker group, the secondary. It's just a culture change that we haven't seen at Texas in a very long time. Let's talk about the quick and dirty going into TCU. TCU's 4-5 on the season, 1-4 in Big 12 play. Only wins over BYU. It was a pretty tough ass whooping they gave them.
Yep.
But this will be the 94th matchup between these two teams. Texas leads the all-time series 64-28-1. TCU, though, since they joined the Big 12, 8-3 over Texas since 2012. Not sure about TCU's quarterback situation. Chandler Morris was sidelined about a month ago with an MCL. Not sure if he's going to play in this one. Looking like it may be Josh Hoover again, redshirt freshman, who's had some moments but also struggled, which obviously we expect from a young quarterback. Texas opens this game at a 10-point favorite. It's dipped down. It's come back up. This TCU team, obviously not as talented as the team that went to the national championship game last year. What do we need to be mindful of as Texas Longhorns as we head into this game this weekend against the Horned Frogs?
Those other and throw another stat out there for you. Sonny Dykes is 3-0 against Texas.
That's right.
He got those 2 wins when he was at Cal, and then he won the game last year at DKR. I just think you need to go in there and handle your business. I don't think there's anything that's going to wow you about TCU? You just brought up the quarterback situation. It seems like everybody's playing with a backup quarterback at some point during the season. They just kind of beat each other up throughout the season. But you sit there and you look at this TCU team, and obviously they're nowhere near. And one of the biggest things that happened for them last year, when you look at this TCU team, they were winning every one of those close games.
Mm-hmm.
Any game that was close for them, they got every break. Everything just kind of lined up for you. And it was kind of fool's gold. Now, I'll take some fool's gold where we get an opportunity to play in the national championship.
That's right.
Fool me all day. Fool me all day. But for them, when they had that opportunity, you start to look back at them. You know, they lost that Colorado game 45-43. That's a game that they normally win, that they would have won throughout that time. They lost to West Virginia 24-23. That's a game that they would have normally won. So you start looking at, then they lost last week, or they lost to Texas Tech 35-28. That's a game that they normally win. When they're in those one-score games, those were the games that they won last year. It's a totally different year, totally different vibe, and you can't play Russian roulette all the time and think that you're going to be able to come away from it all in the right way. So for me, Texas needs to go out there, play smart football. You got to take care of the football. And what we've seen with Malik and even Jonathan Brooks last week with the fumble, you sit there and you look at those moments and you say, wow, I'm surprised we were able to get out of there with a win with all those turnovers. You can't let TCU, which probably would be your last time ever playing them, let them have this over you, especially getting those fans involved and getting everybody fired up, because TCU knows everybody's home game is Texas.
That's right.
And everybody's ticket prices goes through the roof because Texas is coming in. So regardless of what people think out there in the community, oh, Texas ain't nothing, why do ticket prices go through the roof when Texas comes into town?
Yeah, that's right. And this TCU team, I think a lot of teams in the Big 12 that aren't really good when you look at them statistically, especially when you look at their win-loss, I think there's a lot of dangerous teams. There's a lot of teams that could sneak up on you and get you. We talk, you go back a couple weeks to that Houston team. I don't think anybody thought there was a chance that was going to happen, especially once Texas jumped out to a 21-point lead real quick on Houston. So there's a lot of teams that can get you. They're obviously not as talented. I think you nailed it. Texas just needs to take these next 3 games, handle their business, play the games they can play, take care of whoever's the quarterback, whether it's Malik or whether it's Quinn Ewers coming back in. And I think Texas has just the talent. They have the culture and just too much depth across the board where if they just go in and take care of business, there's not a team left on their schedule that they can't handle. Mike, I appreciate you joining us today. Again, you guys can check out Hardball Hardge on Twitter. You like being called Mike, you like being called Hardge.
Hey, you're an athlete. You know we call each other by our last name.
There you go. All right. You'll be Hardge henceforth on our show. We're definitely going to have you back, man. I totally appreciate you coming out. Check Hardge out on Texas Sports Unfiltered as well. That's on YouTube. He does a lot of shows on YouTube. And then check him out on the radio, 1300 AM The Zone, starting on November 13th. Appreciate it, Hardge. Have yourself a good one.
Man. Download the app. iHeartRadio app. You can hear me all over the place, 6 to 8 a.m., starting Monday, November 13th. Thank you for having me on, Sean.
Absolutely, man. Have a good one.
Keep up the good work, bro.
Appreciate it. All right, now we'll kind of finish out with just some random sports thoughts, random college football thoughts. The Big 12 race, 3 games to go. Texas is tied with Okie Light for first with 5-1 record in the Big 12. And then there is an absolute logjam at second. You got 5 teams that are 4-2. You got KU, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kansas State, Iowa State. That's a tough one. I look at this group of teams, and I think realistically, these 7 teams are realistically the only teams that have a shot. I mean, there's probably mathematically possible that someone else could sneak in there and get a win, but that's pretty much it. These 7 teams. I think Oklahoma State has the easiest route to Arlington on December 2nd, and I think Texas probably has the second easiest route to Arlington on December 2nd. But you get into that second tier, that KU, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Kansas State, Iowa State tier. I think Oklahoma is probably the team that's sitting there with the most probability of backdooring into this Big 12 championship game. Who do I think we got going into Arlington on December 2nd? Man, I think Texas is going to be there. We've had them all season. And, man, I don't know that Oklahoma State doesn't mess something up and somehow Oklahoma gets into that game too. I'm not going to call it, but I think it's possible that Oklahoma can still backdoor their way into this thing. Oklahoma State's had some rough games. I know they've come on really, really strong here in the second half of the season, especially down the stretch in the Big 12. But it's been a wild Big 12 so far this season. I don't know that it'll not get any wilder. Let's talk about this Texas basketball team. Starts off with Incarnate Word last night. I did not get to see the game. I cut the cord, folks, recently, and what I found out real quickly is that I don't have Longhorn Network. Longhorn Network does not stream on ESPN Plus with your subscription to ESPN Plus. So I'm going to be Longhorn Networkless through the beginning of this basketball season, all of the baseball season, which really hurts my heart. I love watching the baseball. I'm going to have to figure that out. So if any of you guys have a way to watch Longhorn Network that's on the up and up, shoot me an email, horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Anyway, Texas basketball team just absolutely blasted Incarnate Word last night, 88-56. I don't know what any of that means. I think Texas is athletically probably much better than Incarnate Word. Not a lot early in this season that's going to test Texas from a basketball perspective. What I did see about the game, they're long, they're athletic, they shot well, they dominated. You know, I don't know. We've seen that before out of Texas teams. But so Texas basketball, 1-0 on the season. Texas baseball, real quick, had their World Series, their Fall World Series over the weekend. And I want you guys to remember a name, Will Gasparino. He was a guy that was supposed to get drafted high enough that he never would have set foot on the campus at Texas. Somehow that didn't happen. He signs with Texas. 6'6" outfielder, big bat, all the tools. Hit a couple of home runs in this Fall World Series. Will Gasparino. I think he's going to have a big year for Texas this year. Check us out on Thursday. We'll do Deep Dive Thursday. We will dig all into the statistics on this TCU Horned Frogs matchup this Saturday. We'll do our Trace Otra Games recap from Week 10. We'll have Sean's 4 big questions of the game, TCU edition, and then we'll have some random college football thoughts, I'm sure. Somebody will say something stupid. We'll make fun of it. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow and subscribe won't cost you guys a thing. We appreciate the support. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys get hooked.